Farrah Storr is editor-in-chief of Elle UK. She's formerly of Women's Health and Cosmo. She's the author of the Discomfort Zone. She's done 2 TED Talks, one on authentic leadership. We've already heard from Deborah about how much leadership matters, particularly in these moments of crisis. We're all looking, aren't we, for somebody to show us how to be, what to do, how to behave. So Farrah's written extensively about authentic leadership, and she's also done a talk about the power of discomfort, which again couldn't be more appropriate, could it? We are all feeling extreme levels of discomfort at the moment. Farrah, thank you so much for talking to us today. Obviously, over the next few minutes, you and I are just going to have a chat through some of your experiences in this area. But I just want to start off by asking you about this issue about transforming, and how obviously where we are at the moment, such a critical moment. But do you see what's going on at the moment as potentially leading to some sort of societal reform, change in society?
Well, I mean, look, it's a big question, but I think one of the things that and actually it's the reason that I wrote the book, one of the things over the last kind of 6 and 7 years that I was worried about was actually I thought the wrong narrative was being told to people. And by people, I mean generally younger generations, so younger than me, people in their kind of teens and 20s. The narrative seemed to be, and we've seen this across culture, which was everything that you're afraid of, you don't have to expose yourself to it. You can coddle yourself away. You know, there's this phrase now in society, which is you can hack the system. And hacking the system, of course, means you don't have to confront the obstacle in front of you. You can avoid it. And actually, that's a really good thing. And of course, I never thought that actually that was the right thing to do. So a couple of years ago, when you started to see this behavior across culture, so for example, you know, we've seen started in our university campuses where there was the introduction first in the US and now in the UK of these safe spaces where, you know, students can retreat to if they feel that they are being attacked in any way. We've seen it in non-platforming at student campuses as well, where, you know, if there are people with differing opinions, you don't have to hear that, you know, trigger warnings. So all these things were happening in society, and the narrative which was given to people was, this is the way forward. You can protect yourself from the things that you are most frightened of. And my feeling was actually that's absolutely not true of humankind and human life, and that actually, and we know this, human beings are meant to carry a load. You know, we actually perform incredibly well under pressure. We are made for discomfort. I mean, you know, thousands of years ago, we had to fight for survival. And so what I suppose I hope will happen as a result is that people will start to change the narrative, because I think what's happening now in society is this is something that you can't coddle yourself away from. I mean, it's a global pandemic. There is no way someone can say, well, you can hack this problem or you can hide yourself away from it. You really can't. And so what I suppose I hope will happen is that people will start to understand, and they're going to need leaders to help them understand this, which is when the kind of, you know, that terrible cliche, but they're cliches for a reason. When the going gets tough, actually, it is what we are made for. And actually we behave incredibly well under it.
And it's interesting though there what you were saying about we can't you know, hide away from this, we can't cuddle ourselves away from it, but in some ways that's exactly what we're being told to do, because we're being told to self-isolate. But of course, if we're talking about business rather than personal, having to do that, having to isolate yourself as well as continuing to make money or be a business person or find a new way to behave or find a new way to to survive in this world. So we are all going to have to adapt to this new world whilst being isolated. It's this extraordinary dichotomy, an irony almost.
But I think what we're seeing is the beautiful thing about this is actually you can expose yourself. I mean, you know, I probably spend, ironically, more time with my team. And the interesting thing, what's happening through Zoom, I was talking about this with someone the other day, is people show their vulnerabilities, interestingly. a lot of people have a face on in a kind of corporate environment. You don't really see what's going on. And where you are talking to people through a screen when they are in their own homes, like, you know, I can see you with your dogs, and you see a kind of real vulnerability in people. And actually, as a leader, that is something that you crave. You want to see the real person behind the mask. And so actually it's a very interesting opportunity for leaders now to really understand the workforce that they have, if they lead into it, I suppose. And I think, you know, the other thing to probably say now is, you're right, interestingly, physically we are coddled away, but I think that's why you have to, as a leader, have regular exposure to what's going on in your business, because it would be very easy to either sit there and kind of, you know, block the world out. Or the alternative is, because what is happening is so huge, it's so momentous, you can feel hugely overwhelmed. And I think that's one of the things that I've always felt about challenging situations is, you know, the narrative we tell ourselves is, well, it's too scary, it's too big a problem, I just can't deal with it. And what that is that's a way of actually not dealing with it at all. But the truth I've always found about any situation that you're frightened of or that you're scared of, the real truth is nothing is impossible or nothing is challenging or difficult from beginning to end. You know, that's just what we tell ourselves. You break something down within any situation, and even now, you know, we're not going to battle corona from our lounge, but you break it down into what are the things that you are really, really frightened of. And it's probably, you know, my family. Am I going to have a job at the end of this? How am I going to get my job done? That may be your day-to-day thing. Break it down into the real moments of discomfort within this huge, challenging situation. And once you break it down, then you come up with a plan. And it's a very simple, very similar to Deborah, it's a very simple 3-point plan of understanding how you get through those brief moments of discomfort. And once you do that, the beautiful thing is you feel in control. And, you know, ultimately, the illusion of control is far better than feeling, look, everything is out of control, I don't know what I'm doing, because that's the moment, of course, you become completely overwhelmed and everything shuts down.
I just want to go back to, you said come up with a 3-point plan.
Yes.
How do you do that, and what would the points be, or are they different for everybody?
They will be absolutely different for everybody. So, I mean, look, an example I always give is, you know, a lot of people we know are really scared about, let's say, public speaking. And the reality is public speaking is not terrifying from beginning to end. The whole experience is not terrifying. But you have to ask yourself, well, what is it within that experience that actually I really am frightened of? And you break it down into 3 things. So for me, before I started public speaking, it was the moment that you first get on stage and you have to get everybody's attention very, very quickly. And they're talking and it's very difficult. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm really finding uncomfortable. So what is the plan that I can come up with? And the plan that I personally came up with, and you're right, it's totally different for everybody. But what I came up with from watching lots of speakers was actually, if you turn and if you ask a question to your audience, suddenly they go silent. Suddenly you have a captive audience because they're thinking about themselves. You know, you have to think about, break it down into 3 things. Any more than that, I actually think you start to forget. It's unmanageable. And then work out, okay, what's going to get me through this? Just 3 very simple things. What's going to get me from A to B? And you know, at the moment, I think rather than people going, oh my God, Corona, what's going to happen? Break it down. You know, what are you scared about today? It might be like Deborah was saying, how am I going to get to my clients on time? How am I going to get this piece of work through? But you come up with a plan. And the minute you start feeling in control is the minute actually that you can kind of set sail and get it done.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned leadership, and you also mentioned about, you know, the fact that we're all in our homes now and we're kind of showing another side to ourselves. And you mentioned Huey and Sparky, who I probably should have introduced to everybody. I'm sure more people are looking at them than are looking at me. But it's interesting in this new world that we're living in now, where we are, in effect, showing our soft underbelly to people that we probably would normally give, you know, a more of an armour, you know, sort of, you know, to a more formal front to. But when it comes to leadership, how do you manage those 2 bits? Because you don't, if you're a leader, you don't want to show your team that you're falling apart. You don't want to show them that you're crying in the shower in the morning, which I'm sure many of us are doing. And yet you don't want to pretend that things aren't bad, because they are.
That's right. And so you well, you have to be, and it's, again, it's a terrible cliche now, but you have to be authentic. And actually, what I tend to do with my team is, well, you have to be honest, because actually I don't think now people go, well, you need strong leadership. Depends what strong leadership is to you. Strong leadership for me has never been about a leader going, you know, leading by dominance, going, I have a plan and it's all sorted. Because the truth is, if I had a leader right now going, we have a plan, this is exactly how it's going to work, do not worry, I'd be really cynical. And so actually, I think there's two things. One, you do have to have a plan, but nobody at the moment is going to have this big all-encompassing plan, you know, and that would be foolish to your team to say you have all the answers. But I think what I do is, you take it, again, you break it down, you do it day by day. You know, you have to figure out this week, what's the thing that's on everyone's mind? Well, as a leader, you go, guys, here's the plan. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but we're going to take it 1 week at a time, and I'm going to give you the answers that I have. So you have to show a bit of vulnerability. You have to have a plan. But I think anybody who goes in thinking they have the plan, I personally think your workforce, they're going to see. And you know, I think the best you want is, you do want a bit of vulnerability from your leader. You don't want them crying in the shower, no. But you do want them to go, look, I'm going to take it one step at a time, and I'm going to lead you, and I'm going to lead from the front, and let's just see how it goes.
Yeah. And talk us, I know that you went obviously from this stellar career in print to going to online, which is what a lot of people are in effect being forced to do at the moment, you know, being forced to go from, you know, a bricks and mortar business to an online business because of the situation we find ourselves in. What tips have you got, or how did you find that transition?
I mean, look, it was very hard, as it's hard for lots of journalists who, I've been a journalist for 22 years, a print editor for 10 of those. I still do the print product as well as the digital, as well as online. But it's scary if you have been a journalist, and what you know is you spend weeks on a story, you delve into it, you have time to check the facts, to do a different angle, and then suddenly what you are having to do is produce stories minute by minute. You know, you are competing with everybody. You're not competing with other magazines now. You're competing with shopping channels. You're competing with the news. It's you. The narrative you can tell yourself is, and a lot of journalists, believe me, have done it over the years, is, I can't do this, you know, my career's come to an end. But of course, again, when you break it down what you're scared of, and, you know, with digital, I suppose my fears were, I had a team who, and I still have a team who are brilliant, but I had a team who were like, well, suddenly we've gone from having 3 weeks to write a story to suddenly we have to write one overnight, and we want the quality to be the same, and we still want to come up with a new angle that nobody else will, but we don't have the time. What you have to do is, you just have to break it down with them. And what we've done is, we've just come up with a different way of telling our stories now. I mean, a prime example is, last week, our print product had gone to press. I mean, we worked 3 months in advance. And so we were very aware that the print product, which was going to be on sale, would feel out of date. It wasn't acknowledging what was going on, still a good product. And so actually last week, the brilliance that happened was, I had a team, and I said, look, we now have to put our digital heads on and go, okay, what's the story we can tell? And we did something, I have to say, far more creative than perhaps we would have done if we were just kind of plodding along and this hadn't have happened. And we asked other women to nominate women who were working on the front line. So not NHS actually, but supermarket workers, delivery drivers, funeral directors. We asked other women to nominate those women. We chose 7 women, and we photographed them. And we were like, well, how are we going to photograph them? And so we spoke to this fashion photographer, and she said, look, let's give it a try. I'm going to photograph them through Zoom. I'm going to put a black sheet over my computer, and I'm going to take their picture. And I think ordinarily, if we'd have had time, we would have gone, that's crazy. A fashion magazine should not be doing that. It should not be taking pictures through a computer screen. And actually what we ended up with last week was, we had these series of quite astonishing, hugely creative images, which were in a way a kind of sign of their time, because they were shot through this platform, which has become a lifeline for everyone. So what I would say is, what's come out of this huge discomfort is real creativity. And I think for Elle, you know, I think a lot of people can see fashion magazines as, some people see them as superior. I think actually what those covers did that we released last week is, there was a real intimacy, and it showed a different side to what a fashion magazine can be. So huge flights of creativity can really come out of these kind of crunch moments.
I'm running out of time, Farrah, but I do want to ask you, which is a sort of natural lead on from that, because of course most of the audience we're talking to today work in and around the events industry, and of course they're being forced to go from live human to human interaction events to something more virtual like we're doing today, which is similar from going to print to online. But of course we've been talking for so many years about how, because so much of our lives are taken up with virtual reality and online, that's one of the reasons we all love real interaction and live events, because it's an antidote to that. Now, of course, that has been taken away from us and we're not allowed to do those events. So with your experience, what would you say about how you can, and again, I guess slightly talking about that intimacy that you were talking about just now, but how can we best manage this new world?
You mean if you're working in an events capacity?
Yeah.
I think if you're working in events capacity, you're absolutely right. It's like print and digital. And first of all, you can't compare the two. They are completely different things. There will always be a place when everything rolls around, there will still be a place for live events. But there's also a very special place for digital, and there's a very special place for what's happening now. And I would say, if events are your thing, this is a real opportunity. People get something quite different when they're talking one-on-one through a computer screen. And actually your performers, say if you are doing an event where you're relying on speakers or performers, you actually get something quite remarkably different from your speakers as well. Because, a lot of speakers, what people don't realize is they get nervous. They put on a face when they're on a stage. They behave quite differently to how they behave when they're in their own homes. And so actually, I think it could be a real boon here. I think actually what you will get is a very, very different, you can tell the same story, but you can affect people and tell the story in a very different way. So they are not the same, they are different, but they are both equally brilliant.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting thing to watch, isn't it? How we do all behave differently. I mean, even that thing of, I find these Zoom meetings are so exhausting. They're more tiring than a real life meeting for some way. And all these things that we're having to work out. And of course, we're all exhausted at the end of the day, partly from emotion and anxiety. Farrah, I can see that the questions are coming in. Thank you so much.